Good afternoon, everyone. So today we are come to the topic on basic statistics of the webinar series organized by AIMS Jodhpur and PSI on basic research methodology and thesis writing. Now, shall we go to the topic proper? So I am Dr. Archana Gaur, Assistant Professor in Department of Physiology from AIMS Jodhpur. So we have already seen these are the steps in the dissertation where you start with the looking for the title, and then you go about in like what are the ethical principles and what are the ethics you have considered. You have go about by getting the ethical clearance. Then you start looking for the review of literature. Then you design your study, and then comes the part of understanding data. Then once you have collected the data, then you go for the statistical analysis. So this session will only introduce you to the basic statistics, which will help you in uh, designing your analyzing your data and presenting your results. So first thing, this will help you in just not running through the going to a statistician and help in better understanding of the data. So first of all, why do we need this statistics? So statistics. So we will walk through these things like why do we need statistics? What is sample and how to do this sample size calculation? And then we will go about what is variable, what are these many means of central tendency, means of dispersion, what do you mean by normal distribution, and the various statistical tests. So first, going to why statistics. So why do we need statistics? Once you have collected the data, you have just the numbers, the height of the patient, age of the patient, and so many other data, the BMI and the BP. These are just meaningless numbers. So once you give them meaning, that is, the statistics is a branch of science that deals with the collection, organization, and analysis of data and drawing inferences. So these statistics helps in drawing inferences from the samples to the whole population. So this will give you just the inference of the whole population. Now, what is the sample? So in statistics, the population represents the entire group of individuals whom we are interested. So it is like if you're going to study the BP of young individuals, so all the young population, the whole world, you can't study. So we just take a sample of this. So individuals who we believe are representative of this population. So you can just go to a college where there are young individuals. There is the age in the age group of 18 to 25. A university where you can get this population. So this population will represent the whole population of interest and use them to draw the conclusions about the population. So the whole population is the whole world, but your sample is just the locality. So so this makes it more feasible, taking a sample and analyzing it. So just like when you're cooking, so when you cook, you are cooking a bowl of rice. You can't look for the whole amount of rice. You just take a single rice and you see whether it is cooked or not. This will give you the idea about the whole thing. So first of all, when you have selected your sample, so what must be your sample size? Sample size means what is the number of people in your sample? How many number of individuals do you select? So you can't go on taking all the individuals in the college from 18 to 25. So first of all, you have to identify the major study variable. So what you're going to study? So the study variable is the BP. So you're going to study the BP of them. Determine the type of estimate. It can be a mean, ratio, or percentage, whatever it is. Decide on the precision of the estimate. So how close? Precision is the how close you want to get to the real value, the actual value, and decide on the acceptable risk and estimate that it will fall outside its real population value. So you have to decide also on the risk that there can be errors. So this error also you have to decide earlier itself and adjust for the population size, like 18 to 25 years, what will be the actual population size. Accordingly, you have to adjust for the size. Design effect. Again, the study design effect also you have to take into account and adjust for the expected response rate. There can be attrition, there can be like if you're doing a cohort study, in that case, you will lose the follow-up. In that case, you have to take into account of this attrition rate also. So all these things together, you have to look into account for deciding the sample size. So this sample size requires some of the values, something called p-value, the power of a study, and the effect size. Effect size is nothing but the clinically relevant assumptions. Some assumptions you have to make beforehand based on the previous studies, like whether the outcome, to quantify the difference in outcomes between the study and the control group. And this has to be determined by the researcher itself with the previous scientific knowledge and the wisdom. That there comes your review of literature. So for this, you have to do the thorough review of literature. So review of literature only will help you sample size calculation. So only if you know about the earlier studies, the prevalence of the disease, all these things, if you have gone through, you will be able to easily calculate your sample size. So before we go on to sample size calculation, we will know the terms. We will understand these terms. So what is a variable? So variable is a characteristic that varies. So any data you collect is either numerical or categorical. So what you collect? You collect the name of the patient ID, the age of the patient, the height of the patient, the address, the BP, BMI. So these can be grouped into two major categories. The numerical data. So numerical data includes which are made up of numbers. That is age, weight, number of children, shoe size, all these come under numerical data. Again, this numerical data can be of two types. Either it can be a continuous data or a discrete data. Continuous in the sense it has infinite options. You can have options in between. Age can be 5 years, 5 years, 6 months, 7 days, all these things. Like you can have a value in between. And you have discrete. This has finite options like the shoe size, number of children in a family. All these are just one finite value. You cannot have infinite options here. Then the other type of data, that is the categorical data, that is gender, like male or female, blood type, O, B, AB, all this ethnicity, eye color, all this come under categorical data. This again can be divided into two types, ordinal data and nominal data. Ordinal, by the name itself, it has an order. Data has a hierarchy, that is pain and severity, satisfaction, or the severity of even a numerical data can be arranged into an ordinal data, or a nominal data can be arranged into a ordinal data. Okay, this can be converted also. Nominal data has no hierarchy like eye color, dog breed, blood type, all these things which cannot have a hierarchy. Next, we go on to the descriptive statistics, which gives a relationship between the variables in a sample or a population. So we will see here two important things, the measures of central tendency and measures of dispersion. So first we will go to the measures of central tendency. So data without summarizing, it is nothing. So we need to summarize. So we can summarize in terms of this measures of central tendency or measures of dispersion. So in measures of central tendency, you have mean, median, and mode. Mean, you must all have heard about this arithmetic mean. This is just the average. So here you have to add all the observed values and divide by the number of values. That is, mean is sigma xi, where x is the observed value. So sigma is the summation of all the observed value by divided by number of values. So the sample mean is denoted by x bar, whereas population mean is denoted by mu. One of the problem with the mean is it is profoundly influenced by extreme variables. If there are extreme variables, it gets easily influenced. Like we will see an example. Here we have taken the hemoglobin percentage of 10 adolescent girls. So you have the hemoglobin percentage as 13, 10, 8, 9, and all these values. You sum it up, you get 110.5. And the number of values are 10. So you just divide, the mean comes around 11.05. Suppose you are having a value which is very low, a value 4. So this value actually this 4 is very low. So what happens? Your mean decreases to 9.35. So here in this example, we have just taken the hemoglobin values. In your study, there can be values which can vary very largely. So in that case, you have to take into account all these principles. That mean is usually it varies very largely with the extreme values. In that case, we can use median. So the median actually describes the middle value. So it just distributes the data into two equal halves and the middle value is taken. So this can be useful when there are extreme values. So in the same example where the hemoglobin of 10 adolescent girls has taken, we just arrange in the order. We will arrange either in ascending order or the descending order and take the middle value. Here, since we are having a even number of observations, in case of odd number of observations, if there were 11 observation, you will take the sixth observation as the middle value. In case of the even number of observation, you will just take the mean of middle two values. So here the middle two values are both the 10. So you take the mean of this, you will get 10. We have another central tendency, that is the mode. That here we take value that occurs most frequently. This is used mostly in nominal data. Here, the same example where the hemoglobin of 10 adolescent girls is taken, we just put a frequency distribution table. So the hemoglobin, hemoglobin 8 percentage is present in 2 of the persons. The frequency distribution with maximum number of frequency is the mode. So 10 is present 3 times. Here also you can have 2 modes in case any other value repeats. Then we are coming to measures of dispersion. So only the mean does not tell you about the data, how it is dispersed, how wide it is. The measures of dispersion will help you in telling the measures of variability. So there are 4 different measures of variability: range, interquartile range, mean deviation from mean, variance, and standard deviation. So range is the most simplest one, which tells you about the spread or the variability of this sample. So it is just the difference of minimum and maximum value of observations. The advantage with this is it's quick and easy indicator of dispersion. Again, this has a disadvantage that it can be easily influenced by extreme values as it uses only 2 data points. Interquartile range. So for this, as this can be easily, range can be easily influenced by extreme variables, we take interquartile range where the interval between the value of upper quartile and the lower quartile is taken. So the data is divided into 4 quadrants, into 4 parts, each having 25%. And the interquartile range is the difference in the third quartile to the first quartile. So it actually leaves the other extreme values. So it is unaffected by the extreme values, and the disadvantage with this is covers only the middle 50% of the values. Next, we go on to the mean deviation. Mean deviation is average of absolute deviation. See, this is absolute deviation. Here we are not taking the sign. Okay, in case you take the average of the deviations, you will get 0. So the average of the absolute deviations of the observations from the arithmetic mean. So each observation you will subtract from the mean. So the average of the absolute deviations of the arithmetic mean is the mean deviation. So it is based on all observations in the group, and the disadvantage is it ignores the sign of the difference of the values. So for this, we have come to standard deviation. So standard deviation is nothing but the square root of average of squared deviations of the observations from the arithmetic mean. Because of the sign, we squared the deviations and take an average of it and square root it. So this is the standard deviation. So square root of average squared deviations of the observations from the arithmetic mean is standard deviation. Variance is the measured as nothing but the standard deviation which is squared. So usually standard deviation is represented by the formula, by the symbol sigma. It gives the square root of sigma xi minus x bar the whole square divided by n. And this is the variance with sigma square. Just the root value you have to remove it. The advantage is SD is the most important measure of the distribution. And it has the same units of the measurement as the observation, whereas your variance will have a squared units since it is in square. Okay. So mostly in our data, we will be using either mean plus or minus standard deviation. Most of the data, what we get in our health statistics is represented in mean plus or minus standard deviation. Then coefficient of variation is the SD expressed as a percentage of arithmetic mean. The advantage of this is to compare the relative variability in different groups. So just a percentage expressed as a in different groups. So SD divided by arithmetic mean divided by into 100. Now coming to the normal distribution. So all your data, when you have collected, so most of the values like your BP, age, and all this will cluster around a central value with a symmetrical positive and negative deviations. So you have a central value, and the negative values will be on the left side and the positive values on the right side of the curve. So most of the biological variables are having a normal distribution. And this is a standard normal distribution curve, which is symmetrical bell-shaped curve with mean, median, mode all at 0. So this is all at 0. And this is the 50th percentile, which divides the data into two halves. So mean is also here, the median is also here, and the most frequently occurring values is also here. So this is just a frequency distribution of all your values. So your observed values here and the frequency distribution, if you take, you get this curve. This is a standard normal distribution curve. But what happens? Some of the times you don't get all your values in a normal distribution. You get skewed distribution. A distribution with an asymmetry of variables about its mean is known as skewed distribution. It can be positively skewed or negatively skewed. Positively skewed, that is when the tail on the right side of distribution is longer and the mean and median will be greater. So this is a positively skewed data. So the tail on the positive side is, that is right side, is longer and the mean and median is greater. When the tail on the left side of the distribution is longer and mean and median or less than the mode, then it is a negatively skewed distribution. So this is about the skewing, that is asymmetry in the distribution. There is also one more type of asymmetry, that is kurtosis. That is the pointedness or the pickedness. So if you see this blue curve, this is a normal standard deviation curve. The green one represents the leptokurtosis. That is a small standard deviation. See, the data has a small standard deviation, but a large mean. The platykurtosis, it has a flat curve where there is a flat peak and the deviation, the standard deviation is much larger. So this is about kurtosis. Then we will go about to inferential statistics. So you have already seen about null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. We will just revise it. So data, when we are analyzing it, we have to make an inference from it for the larger collection of population. So we frame a research question or test the hypothesis. So when we test the hypothesis, we frame this null hypothesis. So what does this null hypothesis mean? Which denotes there is no relationship or there is no difference between the predictor and the outcome or the variables in the question. So there is no relationship or no difference between the predictor and outcome variables. Alternative hypothesis is just the opposite of the null hypothesis. It assumes that there is a difference among the groups or there is some association between the predictor and the outcome. Here we are not saying whether it is a positive association or a negative association. The difference is greater than or. So this is a two-tailed study. Mostly we use a two-tailed study only. So in our example, in what you have seen in the first lecture, where the example was given, this is the null hypothesis. Airway narrowing will not be present in asymptomatic school children having family history of asthma as compared to those without family history of asthma. So there is no difference. So there will not be any airway narrowing. So, and the alternative hypothesis will be stated as airway narrowing will be present in asymptomatic school children having family history of asthma as compared to those without family history of asthma. So rejecting or disproving the null hypothesis is what we do in a study. So thus concluding that there are grounds of believing that there is a difference between the groups. So what we do, we just try to test the hypothesis by using various tests and reject the null hypothesis and conclude that there is a difference between the groups. So this is what we do in inferential statistics. So before going to that, we have to set this p-value. You must have heard of this p-value. What is this p-value? So whenever you have to choose a test for, so you have to state in all the statistical methods, if you see, they say that the p-value is, the significant value is set at. So the p-value is nothing but the probability of the event occurring by chance if the null hypothesis is true. So we choose the p-value. It's a numerical value between 0 and 1. So usually p-value is arbitrarily chosen value which tells you about the significance level, and the null hypothesis is rejected. So the p-value and the alpha. The significance, so here we will see what is type 1 error and what is confidence level. So the alpha, the significance level of a test, usually set at 5%, or the p-value is set at 0.05. So the p-value is set by the alpha. So usually the significance level in most of the studies is set at 5%, or it has a value of 0.05. So what is this type 1 error? So when you test a hypothesis, there can occur errors. So the probability of rejecting a null hypothesis when it is true That is, you reject a hypothesis when it is true. That is, there is no difference. Actually, there is no difference, but you say that there is a difference. So you create an error. This type of error is known as type 1 error. And then when you go for the sample size calculation, you have to set the confidence level. What is this confidence level? The probability that an estimate of a population parameter is within certain specified limits of the normal value. It is commonly denoted by 1 minus alpha. So if you see this curve, the normal distribution curve, usually the 68% of the values lie in 1 standard deviation and 95% of the values lie on 2 standard deviations on either side, and 99% of the values lie on the 3 standard deviation on either side of the mean. So this confidence level has a Z value. This Z value you have to substitute in your formulas for calculating your sample size. Just remember this Z value for 95% confidence interval, it is 1.96. Now coming to type 2 error and power. So type 2 error, before going to type 2 error, we have seen alpha, then beta. It is the probability of failing to reject the null hypothesis when it is false. So just the probability of making a type 2 error is beta. So the probability of failing to reject the null hypothesis when it is false. Just if you see what was type 1 error, if this is the null hypothesis and your mean lies somewhere here, and the probability of accepting a null hypothesis when it is, rejecting a null hypothesis when it is true is type 1 error. Whereas type 2 error is probability of failing to reject a null hypothesis when it is false. So actually this is type 2 error. It is the alternative hypothesis which is true, but you fail to reject the null hypothesis when it is false. Then comes the power of the study. So all these things you must remember for deciding the sample size. So that is why we are going into these terms. The power of the study is most important, where the probability of correctly rejecting the null hypothesis when it is false, which is denoted by 1 minus beta. So the power of the study is nothing but the strength of the study. So this power is very important in minimizing your errors, such as the beta error or the type 2 error. So type 2 error is nothing but the chance of false negative results. So the researcher does not detect a difference between the two groups when in reality the difference exists. That is the alternative hypothesis is true, but you state that it is a null hypothesis which is true. That is what is type 2 error or the beta error. So conventionally it is set at 0.20, like your alpha error, which is set at 0.05. This is set at 0.2, which translates to less than 20%. So the chance of false negative conclusion we set at less than 20%. So the power becomes 1 minus beta, that is 80% or 0.80. So the power represents the chance of avoiding a false negative conclusion or chance of detecting an effect if it really exists. So the power is most important thing when you calculate the sample size. And then you have to look about the precision. So how close an estimate to the true value of the population parameter you need to be. So you need to be very close, like at least 80%. So you have to put these values for your sample size calculation. It can be expressed in absolute terms or relative terms to the estimate. We have already seen what is a sample. So we have seen that your sample size calculation needs this p-value, power, and I told you the effect size. That is the assumption, clinically relevant assumption. So this actually gives you from the previous studies. So this you have to take from the previous studies. So we will be seeing three different formulas for calculating sample size. So one for estimating population mean, another one for estimating proportions, and for analytical studies for case control study and cohort study. So for sample size required for estimating population mean, suppose we want an interval that extends d units on either side of the estimates. So d is nothing but the reliability coefficient into standard error. So this is given by the formula. This d is equal to zs by root over n. Z I told you is the value of the coefficient, confidence interval. Okay. So when solved, your n gives z square into s square by d square. So here we are seeing an example, a health worker wishing to conduct a survey among a population of adolescent girls to determine the average daily fat intake. So the health worker must provide all the three: D, that is the desired width of the confidence interval, the desired level of the confidence, the Z value for that, and the magnitude of the population variance. So all these things when you get, so the health worker decides that the interval should be 10 units wide, that is 5 units on either side of the true value. The standard deviation of about 25 grams and confidence level about 95%. So I told you for 95% confidence interval, you have the Z value as 1.96. The standard deviation, yes, is 20 and the D is 10 units. So you just 5 units. So you just substitute these values, you will get a sample size of 61.47. So you can take 62 people in your sample for this estimating the fat intake in adolescent girls. Next, we go on to the next example, that is the sample size required for estimating proportions. The formula requires the knowledge of P. So here the P is nothing but the proportion in the population possessing the characteristic of interest. So this P value you have to, this is different P from what you got earlier, the significant P value. Okay, this P value you have to get from either a pilot study of preliminary sample or the observations from a previous study. So that is why review of literature is important in your calculation of sample size. So this pilot study, if you're doing and you get this proportion of population possessing the characteristic of interest, this you can later on add in your final study also. So if you're not having a p-value, you can set the p-value at 0.5 for a maximum value of n. So the formula here is same as your where you use the population mean, where z square into pq divided by d square, where p is the proportion of the population possessing the characteristic of interest, q is just the complementary to p, that is 1 minus p, z is desired level of the confidence, and the desired width of the confidence interval d. So you just substitute these values, you will get the required sample size. Next, we are going to the calculating sample size for analytical studies. Here you need to have the desired values for probabilities of alpha and beta. So here you can do for case control studies. For case control studies, you should have the proportion of population which are exposed to a particular disease. In cohort study, it is the proportion of the population who are deceased. So this proportion you will get from the previous studies or reports, and the magnitude of effect is either given by relative risk or odds ratio. Again, the formula will take into account the study design. So all these things has to be taken into account, like what type of study, since you are taking cohort study or case control study, the research question and type of data, all these things also will determine the type of formula you want to use. So here we are giving one example where the cohort study of smokers in relation to risk of lung cancer. So according to previous studies, if the proportion of non-smokers who are at risk of disease is 0.1 and proportion of smokers who are at risk of disease is 0.2, just a double of it. So conventional alpha, I told you, it can be set at 0.05 and conventional beta is 0.20. So the 80% power. So beta power is 1 minus beta, that is 80% power to detect the difference if one truly exists. And we assume that we will have equal number of subjects in both the groups. So N1 is equal to N2. Now we start calculating. So P0 is nothing but proportion of non-smokers who are deceased as 0.1, proportion of smokers who are deceased as 0.2, and Q0 and Q1 is just the complementary of P0 and P1. So we get 0.90 and 0.80. And the Z value is 1.96 for 95% standard, 95% confidence interval. The Z value for this is the power of the study is set at 0.84. So now we are substituting these values in this formula. So in each group, we will need with this formula P0 into Q0 plus P1 into Q1 into the Z value for the confidence interval and the Z value for, that is the power of the study, divide the whole square divided by this P1 minus P0 the whole square. So we just substituted the values, we got 196. Therefore, we have to study 196 smokers and 196 non-smokers for this study. And the same formula can be used for case control study also. The same formula, this P0 into Q0 plus P1 into Q1 can be used for case control study also. Though these formulas may look little complex, you can also use various softwares. Actually, there are various free softwares. So this softwares, the link is provided here. So you get this OpenAP software from Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the PS software, Power and Sample Size Calculation by Department of Biostatistics, Vanderbilt, which can be easily used, where you have to just substitute the values for alpha, beta. Here also you need to go through the review of literature for knowing the values. So you have to set these values. So for this, you have to go through alpha, beta, all these values. If you get, you have to just substitute here and then you will get the sample size. So now we are going to hypothesis testing. So before we go into the hypothesis testing, what test to use for testing our hypothesis? We have to see how many variables are there. There are only two variables, whether they are dependent or independent. What is the nature of the dependent and independent? How many categories are there? There are 3 groups, 4 groups, either how many, or it is a categorical variable. Does the continuous variable follow a normal distribution or not? So all these things you must see. So it depends. The test also depends. So is there any pairing in the data or variables? What do you mean by pairing? So pairing is either you have done a pre and post study, or you have matched the groups. So if you have age and gender match studies, then also it is called pairing. So depending on this, your test will vary. So we will just see a So in numerical data, usually, which are quantitative variables, we use parametric tests. If the distribution of sample is skewed or the distribution is unknown, then you can use non-parametric test. Even in a skewed distribution, you can actually convert or transform the data into a normal distribution, either by transforming into log transformation or reciprocal or taking an square root. All these things can be done, and you can transform the data into a normal distribution. So all these things must be first done to decide on the test, and non-parametric tests are done for ordinal or categorical data. The commonly used parametric test, which you will use in most of the studies, which you do, usually we do students t-test or ANOVA, analysis of variance, or repeated measures, ANOVA. So we will just see in case of numerical data, that is you have numbers, that is age, BMI, gender, not gender, sorry, height, all these things. So in case you are having just one group, so only one group is present, you can use one sample t-test or independent t-test in case of it is a normal distribution. If it is not normal, the non-parametric test which is used is sign test. If it is two groups, you have to look whether it is independent or paired. Independent is, if it is independent, you have to use unpaired t-test. The non-parametric part of this unpaired t-test is the Wilcoxon rank sum test, where they actually, here depending on the hierarchy, they just rank it. In case of paired variables, you use paired t-test. If it, the non-parametric part of it is used here is signed rank test or the sign test. When there are more than two groups, then you use independent test where one-way ANOVA is used or Kruskal-Wallis test can be used. Kruskal-Wallis is just the counterpart of one-way ANOVA. That's a parametric part of, non-parametric part of one-way ANOVA. Going to the categorical data. Categorical data, if you have two categories investigating proportions and one group, then you can use Z-test or sign test. If there are two groups, again, if it is independent, you can use chi-square test or Fisher exact test. In case of paired, McNemus test can be used. McNemus test is just the non-parametric test part of paired t-test. If there are greater than two groups, chi-square test can be used or chi-square trend test can be used. In greater than two categories, chi-square test can be used. Chi-square test can be also used for finding associations. So before we go to this, I will just show you screenshots of SPSS software, how you use your data. So this is just when you open the SPSS software, this is how the window opens. So you will have the variables. This VAR represents variables on the columns, and these are the, in the rows you have serial numbers. So you have to arrange your data in this order. The variables, that is height, weight, BMI, BP will be here, and here you will write your patient number or ID, whatever. So this is the data view. There are two different views. There is a data view and the variable view. So this is the data view window. The next data view, I have arranged I have put two groups. So groups can be coded. So I have just put group 1 and group 2. And I have given the hemoglobin percentage of two different groups. I've just put arbitrarily some values of these groups. When you come to the variable view, if you see the variable view, you have to decide what you want to put in the variable view. So first I had put groups as in the variable view, and the type of data was numerical data. What was the width of the, like 8 digits you can add, how many decimals you want, whether you want to label, you want to put some values here, all these things. It can show you the missing values also, the alignment of the text, and what is the measured scale. All these things can be seen. So when you have to analyze your data, so here if you see, here you have this tab open. In the analyze portion, if you go to compare means, you have this one sample t-test, independent t-test, paired sample t-test, just be what we saw. So this can be done. And you also have other tests also, correlation test also you can do, linear regression models, all these things can be done by this. So this is a very easy software, but only if you know what test to use, you should have a knowledge of prior knowledge of what test to use, only then you can use the software. That is why. So if you just put you have just selected t-test here. This is a single independent t-test. I have put, and I get the mean and standard deviation. So this is how you will get the output. So in the independent t-test, I get this significance level. Okay, so this is how you will get the output. So this softwares make your work very easy, but unless you know what is the type of data, what is the value, what is the test you want to use, unless you know all these things, it is waste in your hands. So you must have the basic knowledge. That is what we have tried to do in this session. So the important points you must note here is data most commonly is represented in mean plus or minus standard deviation. If there are more extreme values, only then you use median and standard error of mean. And for sample size calculation, don't just blindly do the sample size calculation. Review the previous studies, get the values of alpha, beta, and the confidence interval, then and the maximum power of the study will give you the minimum error. The power of study is more important. Parametric tests are used for the nominal data, which shows normal distribution. In case of skewness, you can transform the data. This can be done in SPSS also. Okay, transformation of data. And non-parametric tests are done for categorical data and skewed distribution. Always specify your p-value in your study, even if it is insignificant. See, this is very important. Your p-value may show insignificant, but still, if your p-value can be, if you give the p-value, whether it is a 0.04 value, a significant, but a 0.06 can be clinically significant. So just specify your p-value in your study. These are the points to remember. Thank you for listening to this lecture series.